Imagine the end of a king so appalling, so nightmarish, that it made even his loyal courtiers recoil in horror. Yet none dared show it. A twisted body, agony without relief, and a stench so putrid it literally made people faint. When he finally died, his rotting corpse leaked unspeakable fluids that stray dogs drank from the chapel floor. This is not the stuff of legend or cheap rumor. These are the shocking, seldom told final days of Henry VIII, the mighty English monarch brought low by the cruel hand of mortality. Today we're pulling back the velvet curtain to reveal how one of Europe's most feared kings met his excruciating, undignified end. A true-life horror story that proves even the greatest fall. Now let's rewind to his dazzling beginning. Henry Tudor, born June 28, 1491, didn't enter the world as a monstrous tyrant. In fact, when he became king at 17, he was the talk of Europe. Handsome, tall, bursting with energy, and graced with that famous copper-red mane, he was painted as the very picture of Renaissance masculinity. Foreign ambassadors waxed poetic, calling him more beautiful than any prince in Christendom. So how did this golden boy unravel into a bloated, tormented figure whose death would haunt history? He survived, but his leg, badly wounded, never repaired itself. Instead, it turned into a festering sore, oozing pus and stinking so powerfully it announced his approach well before he appeared. For a man as vain as Henry, this was a nightmare. But his courtiers had no choice but to tolerate it in silence. Disgust or complaint could be fatal. That accident didn't just destroy his body, it twisted his mind. Perhaps it's coincidence, perhaps not. But from that time, Henry's paranoia and fury skyrocketed. He ordered the death of Anne Boleyn, his second wife, on trumped-up charges. Some historians think the trauma to his head from the fall made his darker tendencies impossible to control. Unable to walk well, Henry grew corpulent at breakneck speed. The slender, athletic waist of his youth ballooned to over 130 centimeters. He topped 180 kilos, so immense that he had to be hoisted between rooms by pulleys, and palace doorways had to be rebuilt to fit his ever-expanding frame. And then there was his appetite. Forget vegetables. Henry devoured mountains of meat pies, washed down with rivers of ale and wine. He regularly consumed enough calories for 3 men. This diet, combined with almost no movement, only worsened the vicious spiral. Through it all, his wounded leg deteriorated. The best doctors of the age brought treatments that bordered on torture, cauterizing with red-hot irons, rubbing in potent toxins like mercury and arsenic, bleeding him until weakness overtook. None of it helped. Hoping to reclaim a whiff of youth, Henry, 49, barely able to walk, wed Catherine Howard, who was just 19. He apparently saw her as a fountain of vitality, but to those at court, this marriage was little more than a cruel farce. Catherine eventually ran into the arms of a young lover. When Henry found out, both met the executioner. His 6th and final wife, Catherine Parr, was more caretaker than consort. She nursed the king through his agony, probably mindful of what happened to the others. By now, Henry's health was plummeting on all fronts. Today's doctors suspect he suffered from diabetes, severe gout, heart failure, maybe even syphilis. The result? Incessant agony, endless mood swings, and volcanic rages. He'd scream out in pain, curse his closest confidants, then slump into long, dark silences. No longer monarch, but a prisoner inside his own decaying body. He'd scream out in pain, curse his closest confidants, then slump into long, dark silences. No longer monarch, but a prisoner inside his own decaying body. Paranoia seized him. Anyone could be an enemy. Even old friends were suddenly accused of treason and put to death without evidence. The court was on eggshells. A single word, a sideways glance, could spark a fatal suspicion. Just 9 days before his own death, he sent Henry Howard, Earl of Surrey, to the scaffold. Henry trusted no one. Terrified of poison, he made servants taste every dish and combed through his forks and knives for the slightest flaw. It's no surprise, really. By this stage, even his mind was breaking down, possibly the result of countless minor strokes. By winter of 1546, Henry had wasted away to little more than a mountain of agony. Moving him required a virtual army. His leg wounds blackened and rotted. Even in the icy halls of his palace, a spicy fragrance hung in the air. Not for beauty, but to mask the revolting odor of royal decay. Courtiers flooded their handkerchiefs with perfume, yet couldn't escape the stench. Fever and delirium became Henry's constant companions. He often whispered the names of his dead wives, especially Jane Seymour, who died after giving him his precious son, and Anne Boleyn, the wife he'd sent to her death. Even the ghost stories gathered around his bedside. No one dared admit that the king was dying. English law made it treason to so much as suggest it. And so the charade continued, all while the king's body literally decomposed before his own death. On January 27th, 1547, Henry allowed Archbishop Thomas Cranmer to come. Asked if he died a Christian, Henry could only squeeze the man's hand, his last signal to the world. In the early hours of the next day, England's most infamous king breathed his last. But even the grave gave Henry no peace. Custom coffins were built to contain his enormous remains. Still, the body overwhelmed all efforts at preservation. His embalmers, unprepared for a corpse of such size and decay, performed the rudimentary rituals of the day. But it wasn't enough. Finally, nearly 3 weeks after death, Henry was buried at Windsor alongside Jane Seymour, the only wife to bear him a male heir. And what of the legacy Henry fought so ruthlessly to secure? Edward VI, the son he worshipped, reigned for just 6 years before dying as a teenager. The throne went next to Mary, daughter of Catherine of Aragon, who tried to undo her father's Protestant reforms, and then to Elizabeth I, Anne Boleyn's daughter, who would become England's legendary Virgin Queen. So why does the dreadful death of Henry VIII grip us so tightly, even repulse and fascinate in equal measure? Because it strips away the trappings of majesty to expose something universal. No one, not even the mightiest, escapes the failings of flesh. The king who toppled Rome, who rewrote the law for his whims, who thought himself above all others, ended as a cautionary tale, his body collapsing under the same natural laws he thought he could bend. As historian Alison Weir put it, for Henry VIII, the rise was majestic, the fall grotesque. From golden prince to tyrant crippled by pain, he became a lesson in how power, when wielded without restraint, can be destroyed not just by politics, but by the simple, brutal realities of human mortality. Remember the portraits, the proud, thick-necked king with eyes of cold resolve. Then remember the ending. A mountain of decaying flesh, desperate, deranged, and unloved, even by those who had no choice but to serve him. Style hint, a side-by-side comparison. On the left, a classic, proud Henry VIII portrait. Sturdy, brilliantly dressed, eyes full of command. On the right, a dark, pathetic final scene. The massive, dying king slumped in bed, attendants averting their eyes in disgust, perfumes unable to mask the stench. Between the two, dissolving candles symbolize the fading of glory. In the end, Henry VIII's last tortured breaths remind us that no throne is high enough to outrun death, that no glory can shield us from our own physical limits. His reign transformed England forever, but his demise serves as a dark mirror, reflecting the truth that beneath crowns and velvet, we are all, at last, equally fragile. Thank you for joining me through the harrowing final days of England's most infamous king. If you want to hear more untold stories from history's shadowy corners, make sure to hit like and subscribe. Until next time, remember, history's greatest powers often hide the deepest tragedies.